Welcome to the Heart's Haven. Let the story begin. I just want to check my balance. The millionaire laughed. Until he saw the screen. The bank was silent in the way only expensive places could be: soft footsteps, low voices, the quiet hum of money moving without ever being seen. Polished marble floors reflected the overhead lights like still water. Behind the counter, suits and smiles operated with perfect precision, serving clients who never had to ask twice. And then, her voice. I just want to check my balance. It wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. It was small, steady, almost careful, like she had practiced saying it so she wouldn't get it wrong. A few heads turned. Not because of what she said, but because of who said it. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her sneakers were worn at the edges, the kind that made a soft dragging sound with every step. Her coat hung slightly too big on her shoulders, sleeves pushed up as if she refused to let it swallow her whole. In her hand she held a bank card, scratched, faded, but gripped tightly like it mattered more than anything else in the room. At the far end of the lobby, Ethan Caldwell noticed. He hadn't meant to. Men like Ethan didn't notice things like that. Not anymore. He stood near the private service desk, tailored suit sharp enough to cut through the room, a watch on his wrist that cost more than most annual salaries. Conversations paused when he entered places like this. Doors opened before he reached them. Problems solved themselves before he even spoke. So when he heard the girl's voice, something about it felt out of place. He glanced over. And then, he smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly either. Just amused. The kind of quiet, effortless amusement of someone who had spent too long believing the world made sense in numbers. In balances. In accounts that either had value or didn't. I just want to check my balance, she repeated, placing the card gently on the counter. The teller hesitated. For a moment too long. Ethan let out a soft chuckle under his breath, shaking his head slightly as if the situation explained itself. A child. A card. A balance worth checking. He had seen this before. Or at least, he thought he had. People chasing numbers they didn't understand. Dreams that didn't match reality. He took a slow step closer, curiosity pulling him in just enough to watch. What balance could you possibly have? He said lightly, the words slipping out smoother than intended, wrapped in that same effortless confidence that had built his empire. The girl didn't look at him right away. She kept her eyes on the counter, on the card, on the small square of plastic that seemed to carry more weight than it should. It's my mom's, she said softly. Simple. Matter of fact. No shame. No apology. Just truth. Something in the room shifted, barely noticeable, like the faintest change in air before a storm. The teller swallowed, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Ethan crossed his arms, still watching, still expecting this to end the way things usually did. A small number. An empty account. A quiet lesson about how the world works. The machine beeped. The screen flickered to life. And for the first time, no one spoke. The number on the screen did not make sense. At least, not at first. The teller blinked once, then again, as if the digits might rearrange themselves into something more reasonable. Her fingers hovered just above the keyboard, frozen in place. The soft hum of the bank seemed to fade, replaced by a silence that felt heavier than before. Ethan shifted slightly, the faintest crease forming between his brows. He had seen accounts of every size. Numbers that climbed into millions, into hundreds of millions. Numbers that moved markets, built towers, erased entire companies overnight. But this was not what he expected. Not from a child in worn sneakers. Not from a card that looked like it had been carried in a pocket for too long. The teller cleared her throat gently. Sir? I mean, ma'am, she corrected herself, glancing down at the girl. This account. She stopped. Because there was no simple way to say it. The girl finally looked up. Her eyes were steady. Not curious. Not excited. Just waiting. Is it enough? She asked. The question landed softly, but it echoed louder than anything else in the room. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten, just slightly. Enough for what? The teller hesitated again, then turned the screen just enough for the girl to see. Rows of numbers. A balance that most people would never see in their lifetime. And beneath it, a small line of text that did not belong in a place like this. Medical fund. Do not use unless necessary. The girl studied it quietly, her lips pressing together, as if she was reading every word twice. My mom said not to touch it, she murmured. Only if it gets really bad. No one moved. Ethan's arms slowly uncrossed. The polished certainty he carried into the bank began to slip, just enough to make room for something unfamiliar. Something he had spent years learning to ignore. He took a step closer. Where is your mother? He asked, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier edge. The girl did not look at him. She is resting, she said. She gets tired a lot. There was no drama in her tone. No attempt to make it sound worse than it was. If anything, she made it sound smaller. Manageable. Like something that could be solved if you just followed the instructions carefully enough. Ethan glanced back at the screen. Numbers. He had always trusted numbers. Numbers were clear. Predictable. Honest. But this one felt different. Because it was not just a balance. It was time. It was hope measured in dollars. It was a line drawn between maybe and not anymore. Why did you come here alone? He asked. The girl shrugged slightly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. She told me to check, she said. She said if it is enough, then maybe she can stay longer. The words were simple. Too simple. And that was what made them impossible to ignore. Ethan inhaled slowly, the air catching somewhere deeper than it should have. For years he had believed that money was the answer. That every problem had a number attached to it, and if you could reach that number, you could fix whatever was broken. But standing there, looking at a child who treated a bank balance like a lifeline, for the first time in a long time, he was not sure what enough actually meant. Ethan did not realize he was holding his breath until the girl shifted slightly, the soft sound of her sleeve brushing against the counter pulling him back into the room. The bank returned in fragments. A quiet cough somewhere behind him. The distant shuffle of papers. The low hum of a printer restarting its rhythm. But none of it felt the same. He looked at her more closely now. Lily Harper. He had not asked her name, but somehow it felt like he already knew it belonged to something gentle. Something that had learned to stand still in a world that moved too fast. How did you get here? He asked, softer than before. She pointed vaguely toward the glass doors. The bus stops 2 blocks away. I counted the signs. 2 blocks. Ethan pictured it without meaning to. A child walking past storefronts, past people who did not stop, holding onto a single card like it was a map. Like it was the only direction she had. You came by yourself? She nodded. I do that a lot. There was no pride in it. No sadness either. Just fact. Ethan felt something shift again, deeper this time. A quiet discomfort that did not come from the situation, but from himself. Because for years he had built a life where he never had to do anything alone unless he chose to. And here she was, doing it because she had no other option. He glanced once more at the screen. The number had not changed. It sat there, steady, undeniable. But it no longer felt like a solution. It felt like a question. How long has your mom been sick? He asked. Lily thought for a moment, her small brow furrowing slightly. Since before my last birthday, she said. She used to work more. Now she sleeps more. Again simple. Again too simple. Ethan nodded slowly, though he was not sure what he was agreeing with. Does someone help you at home? He asked. She shook her head. I help her. The words were quiet, but they landed with a weight that did not belong to someone her age. Ethan exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to carry something old with it. A memory. Not clear. Not complete. But enough. A hospital room. A chair pulled too close to a bed. The steady beep of machines that measured something he could not control. His own hands, younger then, gripping the edge of a blanket as if holding tighter would make time slow down. He had asked a question once. He remembered that now. Is it enough? He had not understood what he was asking. Not really. And no one had answered him in a way that made sense. He looked at Lily again. She was watching the screen, not with hope, not with fear, but with responsibility. As if whatever that number meant, she was the one who had to carry it. Ethan straightened slightly, his posture no longer as sharp, no longer as guarded. What happens if it is not enough? He asked. Lily hesitated this time. For the first time since she had walked in. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter again, knuckles faintly paling. Then she looked at him. Right at him. And there was something new in her eyes now. Not fear. Not sadness. Something quieter. I think, she began slowly, choosing each word like it mattered. I think then I have to be brave. The words did not break. They did not tremble. And somehow, that made them even harder to hear. Ethan felt it then. Not all at once. Not like a sudden collapse. But like a crack forming in something he had believed was solid. For the first time in years, he did not have an answer. Ethan did not respond right away. The words stayed with him. I think then I have to be brave. They did not sound like something a child should have to say. Not in a place like this. Not in a world where problems were supposed to be solved with numbers, signatures, and quiet transactions behind polished counters. He glanced around the bank again. Everything looked the same. The marble floors. The soft lighting. The carefully measured voices. But it all felt thinner now. Like a surface stretched over something deeper he had never bothered to see. The teller shifted slightly, still waiting, unsure whether to continue the transaction or step away from it entirely. Would you like a printed statement? She asked gently. Lily shook her head. No, thank you. Polite. Always polite. Ethan noticed that. Even now. Even here. She reached for the card, sliding it carefully back toward herself, as if it might break if she moved too quickly. Is that all you needed today? The teller asked. Lily nodded again. Yes, ma'am. She turned slightly, preparing to leave, her small hand closing around the card with quiet determination. And that was when Ethan realized something that unsettled him more than anything else so far. She had not asked for help. Not once. Not for money. Not for guidance. Not even for someone to walk her back outside. She had come here with a purpose. She had completed it. And now she was ready to go back to whatever waited for her, alone. Wait, Ethan said. The word came out before he could stop it. Lily paused, looking back over her shoulder. There was no fear in her expression. No expectation either. Just patience. Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. For a moment, he did not know what he was about to say. He, a man who negotiated deals worth millions without hesitation, found himself searching for something as simple as the right sentence. Do you know how to get home safely? He asked. She nodded. I take the same bus back. At this time of day? Yes, sir. Again, no hesitation. No complaint. Just acceptance. Ethan glanced toward the windows. Late afternoon light stretched across the street outside, long shadows beginning to form as the day leaned toward evening. 2 blocks to the bus stop. A ride home. A quiet apartment where a mother slept more than she spoke. And a child who believed bravery was something you prepared for, like checking a balance. That is not far, he said, more to himself than to her. Lily adjusted her coat slightly, the oversized fabric slipping down one shoulder before she pushed it back into place. I will be okay, she added. It was not reassurance. It was routine. Ethan exhaled slowly. For years, he had surrounded himself with certainty, with control, with outcomes he could predict and manage. But standing here, looking at a child who had already accepted uncertainty as part of her life, he felt something unfamiliar pressing against that control. Not panic. Not fear. Something quieter. Responsibility. Lily, he said, the name coming naturally now, as if it had always belonged in this moment. She looked up at him again. Would you mind if I walked with you? The question hung there, simple but different from anything he had asked all day. Not an order. Not a solution. An offer. Lily studied him for a brief second. Not long. Just enough. Then she gave a small nod. Okay. And just like that, something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But enough. Because for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Caldwell was not walking away. The glass doors of the bank opened with a soft hiss, and the city rushed back in. Cool air. Distant traffic. The low murmur of people moving with purpose. Ethan stepped outside beside Lily, the rhythm of his polished shoes slowing to match the quiet, careful pace of her worn sneakers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The late afternoon light stretched across the sidewalk, painting everything in a soft gold that made even the busiest street feel slower, almost thoughtful. This way, Lily said, pointing down the block. Ethan nodded. 2 blocks. He had walked farther distances without noticing them. Between meetings. Between buildings. Between decisions that never followed him home. But this felt longer. Not because of the distance. Because of what walked beside him. They passed a storefront with bright displays, the kind designed to catch attention. Lily did not look. She kept her eyes forward, focused, as if distractions were a luxury she had learned to ignore. You come here often? Ethan asked. She shook her head. Only when Mom asks me to check. How many times has she asked? Lily thought for a moment. 3. Ethan absorbed that. 3 times. 3 moments where a child had been sent out into the world to measure something no child should have to understand. They reached the corner. The crosswalk signal blinked red, counting down in bright numbers. Ethan glanced at it instinctively. 20 seconds. Plenty of time. But Lily did not step forward. She waited. Patient. Careful. When the signal turned, she crossed, her small steps steady, never rushing. Ethan followed, watching her more closely now. Not out of curiosity. Out of something else. Something that had begun back inside the bank and had not left him since. What does your mom do? He asked. She used to work at a diner, Lily said. She made pancakes. There was a faint shift in her voice then. Not sadness. Something warmer. She makes them shaped like animals, she added. She says it makes people smile more. Ethan felt that again. That quiet pressure in his chest. Because he could picture it. A small kitchen. A warm stove. Batter poured into shapes that were never perfect, but always meant something. Does she still cook? He asked. Lily shook her head. Not much now. She gets tired. They walked a few more steps in silence. Ahead, the bus stop came into view. A simple metal bench. A faded schedule posted on a pole. Nothing remarkable. And yet, to Lily, it was a connection. To home. To responsibility. To whatever came next. She stopped near the bench, turning to face him. "This is where I wait," she said. Ethan looked at it. Then back at her. Then down the street, where cars passed without slowing, where people moved without noticing. "You wait here alone?" he asked. She nodded. "It is okay." Again, not reassurance. Routine. Ethan inhaled slowly, the city air feeling different now. He had spent years building systems that removed uncertainty from his life. And here she was, standing in the middle of it, accepting it, living with it. He looked down at her, really looked this time. Not at her clothes. Not at the situation. At her. "Lily," he said quietly, "what happens after you get home?" She held the card a little tighter. "I check on Mom," she said. "And then I tell her what the number says." Ethan's gaze dropped to the card in her hand. That small piece of plastic. That number. That weight. And in that moment, he understood something he had missed his entire life. This was not about money. It was about what came after the number was spoken out loud. The bus had not arrived yet. The street hummed with movement, but around the small metal bench, time seemed to slow. Cars passed. People crossed. A breeze carried the faint scent of something warm from a nearby cafe. But Lily stood still, her place in the world marked by a signpost and a schedule she had likely memorized. Ethan remained beside her. He had not checked his watch. That alone was unusual. Normally, every minute of his day had a purpose, a destination, a measurable return. But now, there was no urgency pulling him away. No call he needed to take. No meeting that mattered more than this quiet moment on a city sidewalk. "How long does the bus take?" he asked. "Sometimes 5 minutes," Lily said. "Sometimes longer." She did not seem bothered by the uncertainty. Ethan glanced down the road, then back at her. "And you always wait?" She nodded. "It always comes." There was something about the way she said it. Not hopeful. Certain. As if waiting was not a question of if, but when. Ethan let that settle. Because in his world, nothing was guaranteed unless it was controlled. Scheduled. Secured. And yet here she was, trusting something as simple as a bus to show up. Trusting it the way she trusted that number on the screen. The number that decided how much time her mother might have. "Lily," he said slowly, choosing his words with more care than he was used to. "What are you going to tell her today?" She looked down at the card in her hands, her thumb brushing lightly over its worn surface. "I will tell her the number," she said. "And then?" She hesitated. Not long. But long enough for the silence to feel different. "I will tell her it is enough," she added quietly. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "You are sure?" he asked. Lily gave a small nod. "She always smiles when I say that." The simplicity of it struck him harder than anything else. Not because it was complicated, but because it was not. A number. A sentence. A smile. That was the entire equation. Ethan turned his gaze toward the street again, but he was not really seeing it. He was seeing something else. A younger version of himself, standing in a room that smelled too clean, listening to words he could not fully understand. Watching adults speak in careful tones, translating reality into something softer, something easier to carry. He had not been given a number. He had been given silence. And silence had felt heavier. "Do you believe it?" he asked, almost without thinking. Lily looked up at him. "For her," she said. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. Not because she knew it was true, but because she chose it to be. Ethan exhaled slowly. For her. Not for herself. Not for certainty. For her. The bus appeared in the distance then, rounding the corner with a low rumble, its headlights cutting through the soft glow of the afternoon. Lily straightened slightly, preparing. Routine again. Predictable in the ways that mattered. Ethan watched it approach, something shifting deeper inside him now. Because for the first time, he understood that belief was not about numbers. It was about who you were willing to hold them for. And suddenly, he was not sure he could let her carry that alone. The bus pulled closer, its engine low and steady, tires rolling over the pavement with a sound that felt louder than it should have. Lily stepped forward slightly, ready. That was when Ethan moved. Wait. The word came out firmer this time. Not uncertain. Not searching. Certain. Lily paused mid-step, turning back toward him, her expression calm but questioning. Ethan looked at the bus, then at her, then back at the street as if measuring something that could not be seen. For years, his instincts had been simple. Observe. Evaluate. Move on. Do not get involved in things that do not belong to you. Do not step into situations you cannot control. Do not open doors you cannot close. But standing here now, none of those rules felt right anymore. You should not have to do this alone, he said. Lily tilted her head slightly. I always do, she replied. There it was again. Not a complaint. A fact. Ethan took a breath, slower this time, grounding himself in something he had not used in years. Not logic. Not calculation. Choice. Not today, he said. The bus came to a stop in front of them, doors folding open with a sharp mechanical sound. A few passengers stepped down, others moved forward to board. Lily glanced toward it, then back at Ethan. I have to go, she said simply. I know, he answered. And I am coming with you. The words settled between them. Different from everything he had said before. Not a suggestion. Not a passing offer. A decision. Lily blinked once, surprised, but not alarmed. You do not have to, she said. Ethan almost smiled at that. Of course. Even now, she was not expecting anything from him. I know, he repeated quietly. But I want to. For a moment, the world narrowed to that choice. Step forward. Or stay where he had always been. The bus driver glanced at them, waiting. Ethan stepped up first. It was a small motion. One step. But it carried more weight than any deal he had ever signed. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet, paying for both fares without looking at the amount. For the first time in years, the number did not matter. Come on, he said gently. Lily followed, climbing the steps with careful balance, her small hand brushing the railing. They moved down the aisle together, finding 2 seats near the middle. The bus doors closed behind them, sealing off the outside world as the vehicle began to move again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city passed by through the windows in blurred colors and shifting light. Ethan sat back, his posture no longer rigid, his hands resting loosely instead of clenched. This was unfamiliar. Unplanned. Uncontrolled. And yet, it felt right. Lily held the card in her lap, her fingers still wrapped around it as if letting go was not an option. Ethan noticed that. Lily, he said after a moment, his voice quieter now, steady in a way that felt new. When we get there, you will not have to explain it by yourself. She looked at him. Not fully understanding yet, but listening. Ethan met her gaze. And for the first time since he had heard her voice inside the bank, he was no longer standing on the outside of her story. He was part of it. The bus slowed as it turned onto a quieter street. The city outside changed almost without warning. The tall glass buildings gave way to smaller storefronts, then to rows of modest apartments. The sidewalks were less crowded here. The noise softened. Life moved differently, slower, closer to the ground. Lily sat still beside him, watching the familiar route pass by. Next stop, she said quietly. Ethan nodded. He had not asked where they were going. Not exactly. He only knew he needed to see it. To understand what waited at the end of that number. What lived beyond the screen. The bus came to a gentle stop, the doors opening with a soft mechanical sigh. They stepped off together. The air felt cooler here. Lily led the way without hesitation, turning down a narrow sidewalk lined with older buildings. Paint chipped in places. Windows slightly worn. But there were small signs of care, potted plants on steps, a curtain drawn just enough to let light in. "This is my building," she said. Ethan looked up. 3 floors. Brick faded with time. A single light above the entrance flickering faintly even though the sun had not fully set. Lily pushed the door open. Inside, the hallway was quiet. The kind of quiet that held stories in its walls. The floor creaked softly under their steps as they walked. "Up here," she added, already moving toward the stairs. Ethan followed. Each step felt different. Not because of the climb. Because of what he was about to step into. At the top of the second floor, Lily stopped in front of a door. Slightly worn. A small scratch near the handle. A piece of paper taped beside it with a child's handwriting that read, "Home." She reached for the knob, then paused. Her fingers tightened slightly around the card. For the first time, she hesitated. Ethan noticed. Not the fear, but the weight. This was the moment. The one she had been preparing for since she left the bank. The number. The answer. He stepped a little closer, lowering himself just enough so his voice would meet her at eye level. "You do not have to carry it by yourself," he said gently. Lily looked at him. Really looked this time. As if trying to understand what that meant. Then, slowly, she nodded. She turned the knob. The door opened. Warm light spilled into the hallway. And for the first time, Ethan stepped into a world where numbers were not the most important thing. The apartment was small, but it was warm. Not the kind of warmth that came from expensive heating or polished interiors. This was different. Softer. Lived in. The kind of warmth that held memories in quiet corners. A faint scent of something sweet lingered in the air, like pancakes made days ago, still remembered by the walls. "Mom?" Lily called gently as she stepped inside. Her voice carried down a short hallway, careful not to be too loud, as if even sound needed to be handled with care here. There was a pause. Then, from the other room, a soft reply. "I am here, sweetheart." Ethan felt something in his chest shift again. Not sharp. Not overwhelming. Just real. Lily walked ahead, and Ethan followed, slower now, aware that he was stepping into something that did not belong to him, and yet, somehow, he had been invited in. In the bedroom, a woman lay resting against a stack of pillows. Her face was pale but calm, her eyes gentle as they found Lily first, and then Ethan. For a moment, no one spoke. Lily moved closer, climbing carefully onto the edge of the bed, her small hand reaching for her mother's. "I checked," she said softly. Those 2 words carried everything. The walk. The number. The weight. Her mother smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "And?" she asked. Lily hesitated. Just for a second. Then she glanced at Ethan. He gave a small nod. Not telling her what to say. Just reminding her she was not alone. "It is enough," Lily said. The words were steady. Chosen. Her mother's smile deepened, relief passing through her eyes like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I knew it would be," she whispered. Ethan looked at them, really looked. At the way Lily leaned closer. At the way her mother held her hand, not tightly, but like something she never wanted to let go of. And in that moment, the number lost its meaning. Because it was not the money that gave them peace. It was the belief. The moment. The choice to hold on to hope, even when it could not be measured. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "My name is Ethan," he said, his voice calm, respectful. "I met Lily at the bank." Her mother studied him for a moment, then nodded softly. "Thank you for walking her home." He shook his head. That was not enough. The words surprised even him. But they felt true. He reached into his pocket, then stopped. Not for his wallet. Not for a solution written in numbers. Instead, he looked at Lily. Then at her mother. "We are going to make sure you do not have to count time this way anymore," he said quietly. No promises that sounded too big. No grand declarations. Just something simple. Something human. Lily's fingers tightened gently around her mother's hand. And for the first time, Ethan understood what wealth actually meant. It was not what sat in an account. It was what you chose to do when someone needed more than a number. Because sometimes, the smallest voice in the quietest room could change everything. And sometimes, all it took was someone who finally chose to listen.